So you mentioned you're kind of more of a pantser. I've been a heavy outliner. I've also been a pantser, and I've kind of come to the middle of I'm a
Yeah.
little bit of both. So where do you do you outline everything? Do you just kind of write it and edit it later?
Okay, I'm so far in the pantser category that
Hmm.
I almost can't talk about planning. I think it just speaks to the way my mind works. But it's almost like I write to a point and I'm discovering the work as I'm writing it, which
Hmm.
seems weird. At one point in this story, I shocked myself, or I should say, the story shocked me. I was typing and the nemesis the most horrible character in this book accuses somebody of something, and I'm just typing along and something comes out and it just was so shocking to me. I just stopped
Hmm.
and I was like, oh my god, this can't be true.
Hmm.
And so then I just go to the keyboard and I go, it's almost like I'm questioning the story along with the story. Well,
Yeah.
how could that? Oh, now it's making sense to me.
Hmm.
And then I start to type. Now there's edits that go on. I'm not saying that you write it and it's perfect. I think when you kind of go through an inspirational process, there's a lot more cleanup on aisle five,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot more trimming, and you've got to go back and then look at things. When you structurally look ahead and you kind of see where it's going, you can control things more: pacing, timing, rhythm, all those things. When it comes to you in kind of a flood of inspiration, you've got to clean it up
Hmm.
because you'll have a tendency. It's like the horse returning back to the barn. It starts to gallop. You'll
Hmm.
start to kind of rush some things that then need to be kind of slowed down and filled out. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of heard some things I've heard before, kind of like if you do outline, that first outline is kind of like your first draft, where you're
Yeah.
basically writing the book, you're just not writing the prose essentially.
Right.
But you know, if you just pants it the whole way, then there's a lot of cleanup that has to
A
happen.
lot.
Yeah. I
A
think
lot.
I kind of end up, what I've found is even if you out like, because like mine's a fantasy series that's gotten fairly extensive. And so I kind of went really heavy into the outlining. And what I
Yeah.
found with that was that no matter how much I outlined it, that same thing would happen where I would be writing and then I would write something that kind of shocked me or didn't fit with the
Yes.
outline. And so no
Right.
matter how hard I tried to plan it and
Yep.
outline, my creativity still went somewhere. And then I was like, well, crap, I got to go back and fix
Yes.
the
Well,
outline.
what the old saying, "Life is what happens while you're planning other things."
Hmm.
I think writing is that same thing, and if you don't go with that inspiration, I think you lose something.
Hmm.
And I think some of the best stories that are told are ones that come from a very organic place because that's how life is: unexpected,
Hmm.
messy, twisty, turny. It's not plotted and methodical. It's spontaneous. Having said that, that takes a lot more work.
Hmm.
So I understand the ability. And if you just, and again, it's what do you want as an author? Are you saying I'm going to write a kids mystery series and it's going to have, 7 novels and they're all going to involve a hotel?
Hmm.
I mean, you can construct things and create, I think, a satisfying product for an audience.
Yeah.
But it's just what's in your heart? What are you trying to get out of the writing process? What is your reward? And you just have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I kind of ended up in the middle where so like one of the things that helps me a lot is knowing where I'm going. So I generally have like, I know where it starts and I know the ending. And
Yeah.
then I have a few scene ideas in the middle, you
Right.
know. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of the exploratory part is like, okay, I know I'm here and I want to get to here. So how do I connect
Yeah.
that, string of
Right.
thoughts?
Right. The other thing that's interesting is, this idea, and I think for some people this is probably a daunting thing, but I think good works have more than one plot.
Hmm.
There's a primary and secondary, and you'll see this in sitcom writing and everything. There's this overarching arch. Here's the conflict, but there's this simmering other issue,
Hmm.
and I think that's what gives it that interest and that complexity. That it's not so linear.
Hmm.
They're doing it for a primary reason, but they've got a secondary reason as well,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I think, kind of again back to movies and TV. I think that's why a lot of things right now aren't working. I just started watching a show. It's called Tracker. I don't even know
Okay.
what it's on, but it's just a normal network show. So it's not like a
Yeah.
streaming show. And I was like, man, the first episode happened, and it's kind of a procedural show. So it's like, um, it's not really a cop procedural, but it's basically that where the guy has like there's kind of the baddie of the week kind of thing,
Yeah. Right.
um, which is great on its own. But then right in the very first episode, they kind of add this like little sub thing that he's dealing with personally.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
kind of
There's
the
a
through
moment.
line that's gonna happen
Yeah.
throughout multiple episodes. And the moment
Right.
I saw that, I was like, "Man, this is what a lot of these streaming shows and stuff are missing." Like, they just don't
Yes.
have this, "Yes, there's this is the plot, it's happening, but this is
Yes.
what's really happening underneath."
Right. And it's just lays there festering, not quite resolved.
Mhm,
Right. So, you've got this thing, in my book, my editor, I give her credit. She says, I think there's a layer to this you haven't explored, but it's going to require a price from you. And the price is that the protagonist can't just save the world. That's nice. That's
mhm,
wonderful. Right. But what is the personal involvement in this story? And as
mhm,
I went back and began to explore it, I realized that if this is truly an autobiographical novel, that there was an emptiness in this child that I experienced through the loss of my father
mhm,
at a young age. And so I wrote this as kind of a subtext to his journey to go and confront these global issues. There is also a personal one in trying um, to understand injustice, to understand why things happen in a world that seem unfair,
yeah,
right? So I think combining those, it's kind of like say the most powerful stories are poignant stories because they're both sweet and bitter.
mhm,
A hard one to strike, but if you can get it right, that poignancy really I think can be very moving.
yeah. It's finding something that, um I like it's the internal conflict. It's like what's the character dealing with that actually matters? Like, yes, they're
Yes,
fighting the bad guy and yes, they're
right.
on the adventure, but what are they dealing with on the inside that makes you able to connect with them of like, man, I deal with something like that too, you know?
Right, right. Because there's a degree in all of us of conflict, right?
Mhm.
We're conflicted as people. We want to do right, but maybe in doing right, it brings up another issue. And what is that issue? And that's where things get interesting.
Mhm. Yeah. And then if you can start connecting, the main character and the side characters and all their internal conflicts start
Right,
competing,
right,
then you really get some fun stuff happening.
right. Well, then you have a world, right?
Yeah,
That's what in fantasy you have a world, and
yeah,
it starts to become enriched. Yeah.
for sure.